Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guest today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, we're talking about a term that I have literally never heard of, practical authenticity, but it sounds super fun. And I have an amazing guest here to break it down for us and talk with me through it. So Adam Malone, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brandon. Glad to be here.
So you've already stumped me. Practical authenticity. I know we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but I'd love to hear you elaborate more for the audience as well. What does this term mean?
Yeah. Before I talk about what it means, I'd love to give a little bit of the why, because I think you have to understand why practical authenticity is important before you can really embrace it in your life. So I work with people and their teams on trust and leadership generally, but trust especially. And building trust is really three components. And I don't even really like to use the word build trust. We establish trust, but that's another conversation probably. But trust is really three components. It's when you show empathy, authenticity, and also logic. We're only going to take 15 minutes a day or so we can't go into all three. But let's focus on the authenticity piece for a minute. And again, before we say what is practical authenticity, I think it's good to reflect on what do people often get told when they're told, just be authentic. And they're told just be yourself. I got to say, Brandon, just be yourself is terrible guidance. Really terrible.
There's a lot of people where there's whether I've prepped them for meetings or just meeting them on the street, I'm like, maybe don't be yourself for this particular interaction. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, or we tell people to be themselves and then don't give any context. And the truth is, I've had versions of Adam that weren't kind. I've had versions of Adam that were too arrogant or whatever. And I just thought I was being myself, and so that was authenticity. And being authentic is not licensed to be a jerk. It's not licensed to say whatever you want. It's not just free reign. I'm being authentic. And so kind of getting to the practical authenticity idea, what we need to help people realize is how can you be true to yourself? Don't put on a front, but how can you do that in a way that people want to be a part of your life? They want to trust you, they want to engage with you, and they want to be on your team. And to do that, you have to be able to bring those authentic components into who you are every day, make them consistent with who you are, and people have to see that and trust in you and that they're getting the real you. But that doesn't mean the real you can just say whatever you want and do whatever you want and, I'm just being true to me sort of thing.
Yeah, help me break this down. What popped into my head as you were saying that is there's authentic or authenticity, which is what we're talking about. And I think you're hinting at unfiltered, which is totally different. So help me distinguish
that's good.
Different.
I like that. Yeah, so the difference would be unfiltered is just, saying whatever you want, doing whatever you want. I'm not going to kind of limit who I am to fit into this situation. And there's certainly some places when you've established a lot of trust, we do all need some places to be unfiltered. I think that's very healthy, but I think it's very unhealthy if you bring that vibe to every interaction, because not every interaction is at the level where you can be unfiltered, because we all have strong opinions and strong ideas that maybe aren't polished. Maybe they're not complete. We need a safe place to talk about those things, but that doesn't mean that every interaction needs that level of unfilteredness, as you put it. And so here's an example. One way that people can be practically authentic is to be agendaless or acknowledge that you have an agenda. So people, when you're building a relationship with them, one of the ways they determine if you are authentic is, can I tell that this person there's something behind what they're saying. I can't really put my finger on it, but it seems like they want something out of this, but they're not telling me what it is. So you show up with an agenda. You know, everyone that's in sales is going to have this sort of issue, right? Like, I only make money if I sell something to you, Brandon. And so I naturally have an ingrained agenda. And so one question I get a lot is, well, like, I do have an agenda. like we're all in this business race together at some point because we want to feed our families and have a good life. And usually that means that we are selling something. And so you can be agendaless or at least transparent that you have an agenda. Hey, I'm glad we got to meet today, Brandon. You know, one of the reasons I like to do podcasts is because it's good for my business, because people get to see me as an expert on trust. And I appreciate that you're helping me be an established expert on trust. Just like Brandon, you could say, yeah, I need good, interesting podcast guests to have a successful podcast. Like, we both have an agenda. And if we hide it, we're not really going to get into a place of trust. So when we can kind of both come and openly say, like, this benefits me, this benefits you. Yeah, I have an agenda, but ultimately, as humans, self-interest isn't bad. It's just bad when it's dishonest. Does that like agendaless or open agenda kind of help understand a little bit more like how we can be practically authentic in interaction?
Yeah, because I mean, it even gets past the point of some people will say, well, are you being only selfish in your interactions? And I'm not going to say this is good or bad, but if you at least tell people that you're being selfish, well, at least you're not doing anything wrong, right? So there's the transparency in your agenda. Like, I'm only here so that Adam buys a $1 million car for me after this episode. Like, that's my agenda. And if I fail, then I'm going to feel like crap. So
I've got
at
bad
least
news.
I told you.
I don't have $1 million for a car. So Brandon, I guess we should just get
Then
off,
let's wrap this up. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that, like, that first step of, like, it's just honest, right? Like, if you do have an agenda, kind of owning that openly, it puts people at ease, because honesty usually puts people at ease. And once they've moved through that point, now you can take your relationship and your conversation to a deeper place. And maybe it's worth mentioning here that all of us are selling something at some point. But if the only reason you're interacting with someone is to sell them something, and I want to differentiate that with giving them value. If your sole focus is like, how quickly can I get your client or customer to take their pocketbook out, as opposed to, I have something valuable, you need something valuable. The standard way economies work is I trade valuable things for money. That's how this all works. But the more we can give people value as a part of that authentic interaction, before we're asking for something in exchange, again, the more people are going to see that while we have an agenda, that doesn't necessarily mean our agenda is selfish. And I can give you value, I can help you in your day-to-day, and still kind of have a goal of selling something. But if I'm only going to give you value or support you if you help me, like, people are going to be turned off by that. And if someone says, like, well, I can't do this practical authenticity thing because I can't, offer value or engage in that way, I would say, like, maybe you should work on that as your issue. Like, your problem isn't that you can't show up authentically. Your issue is, like, selfishness comes back to bite all of us in the end. And so if you want to be authentic and you want to be trusted, you're going to have to put trust out in the universe. You're going to have to put value out. Otherwise, people aren't going to want value from you.
Yeah, and we always hear people say that you're always selling something, right? And I think a lot of people, there's a misconception that there has to be dollars exchanged. If we boil that down to its essence and just say selling something is really just agreeing on something, whether it's agreeing on not doing something, it's agreeing to exchange money for value. I sold you on coming here because the promise is that I'm going to get you in front of my whole audience, which is me and my mom. But outside of that, you saw value in that. And that's awesome, Adam.
I've heard your mom's a great lady.
She's great.
I want to get to know her more.
She's going to love this episode.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
I'm kidding. But all jokes aside, it really is. It is simple, but that is a very. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not
Right.
easy. That's a very big first step that we have to address. So I'm glad you went there and explained that. So
Yeah.
talk to me then about this practical authenticity.
Yeah.
What does this look like in the workplace? You're talking to an audience of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
How do we incorporate this in our day to help grow our businesses?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, a lot of this is going to deal with how do we work with our teams, and building trust with our teams and being authentic with our teams is a huge part of having productive, happy employees. So, show up agendaless, right? Is the first. Second, as leaders, we often fail when we tell people things are going to be easy, or we don't acknowledge that things are going to be difficult, especially because when we're talking to our teams about new work or different work, we're excited about it. We know it's going to be more work, but we don't want to tell them that, because then, they're not going to want to do it. But they know, right? They know that the new client is work, or they know that the new project or the new software build or whatever is work, or it's going to be difficult, or it's going to take effort. And so when we don't kind of openly acknowledge that not everything's going to be easy, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because 9 times out of 10, the team already knows it's not going to be easy. And so we walk away from that and like, oh man, every time Adam brings this new client crap to us, like he just acts like it's all sunshine and rainbows. But I'm the one who's going to have to work 60 hours this week because, he sold something. And so I'm not saying that we need to just be over the moon excited that it's going to be hard. That's not what I'm saying. But instead, when we come and we talk about new business or talk about struggles that are coming because of work we need to do, we can just own that. Hey, team, like, this is going to be a little difficult. I know that. I appreciate your investment ahead of time. And you might have to acknowledge a mistake. Hey, one of the reasons this is going to be difficult is like, I actually misunderstood the calendar. I didn't realize that both of these clients wanted to launch in the same week. That's my fault. I'm going to go work on making that better. You may even have to apologize. Like, I'm sorry. But we're a team and we work together, and sometimes we have to overcome each other's mistakes. I need y'all's help to get through this difficult situation so we can all satisfy the client, the business can grow, and that's good for all of us, right? But you kind of see, hopefully, how that progression of you're not trying to make light of the fact that it's going to be difficult. But sometimes when we do kind of ignore the difficulty, the team just doesn't trust us. They don't believe that we understand their pain, which is part of empathy. That's another trust component. But owning those mistakes, owning the difficulty, and making like our workplace a place of honesty around those things will then enable people to tell us when things weren't difficult. And that'll also help us all grow together a little bit more and plan better and manage projects better and all those things.
So if there's a leader listening to this podcast, and they're feeling a little bit like, oh, Adam's putting the spotlight on me because maybe I'm not the best example of this. I've run into a lot of people where they have to be right, and they have to feel like they're in a position of authority, and it just like it is my way to break that mentality and to go down the path of more practical authenticity. Let's say they have trust. What's the biggest first thing or couple of things they can do to start down this path and then gain even more respect from their team?
Sticking with the practical authenticity piece.
You tell me. I don't want to limit you. What first comes to mind for you?
Well, let's say we've talked about that a little bit. I said there's 3 components to practical authenticity: empathy, logic, and authenticity. To trust, empathy, logic, and authenticity. I often think that we fail on all 3 of those measures because we don't adequately consider the other person's perspective. Like, that has a flavor of empathy, but I'm actually thinking a little bit deeper than that. So for example, logic, when I say like, hey, to build trust, you need to have logic, the natural response is like, well, cool, I'm a logical person. And that's not actually, I mean, that is important. Like being logical is important, but in like a trust building exercise, it's not that Brandon needs to be logical. It's that I need to believe and understand that Brandon is logical. And so often we go into these engagements and we're like, I'm an authentic person. I'm an empathetic person. I'm a logical person. And we focus on like Adam, Adam, Adam. As opposed to really, we need to say like, does Brandon feel like I'm empathetic? Does Brandon feel like I'm authentic? Does Brandon feel like I'm logical? Because I could be all of those things in spades. But if Brandon, if you or your audience, if you're not perceived by your audience, by those you're interacting with in those ways, you're not going to get what you want. And so maybe that's kind of the meta concept there is you have to consider the way people view those things about you and then invest honestly in shoring up each one of those individually and understanding where you may have a wobble on, hey, I'm actually not showing up empathetically because I'm stressed. I am empathetic. I do care. But when I'm stressed, I sometimes have like stress responses that don't sound very empathetic and they sound more like, yeah, we just got to get the work done. And so then I need to say like, okay, well, how do I take a step back and demonstrate the empathy that I feel so that the people also feel that empathy within me.
I like that. So I want to hear your take on this too, because you have empathy, authenticity, and logic, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
logic is very clearly cognitive. It's all in the brain. If it makes logical sense, A to B to C, boom. Empathy is very emotional. Where does authenticity fit? Is there a third category, or is it kind of the bridge between the two?
I almost think about approaching them as more like we think about the five senses, which, by the way, there's not actually five senses. There's more than five senses, but
Wow, that sounds like a whole different podcast episode. That I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll do that another time. But think of them as like they're all senses. They're all like data, and so none of them individually is emotional or cognitive or anything. They all have aspects of those things within them. And so even within empathy, there are emotions involved with it, but it's like when I think about how you react logically, do you do that with empathy? Like actually, they kind of can go in between one another. And so I don't think you can necessarily separate them super easily and think about them as like, oh, this is a cognitive thing and this is an emotional thing. Because, for example, an emotional thing related to empathy is like, oh, that's a feeling. But your feeling about whether or not I am empathetic is going to be based on past performance. Did I show empathy in a prior engagement? And so that's data, that's reflection on an actual event. So that's, even though empathy is an emotional topic, it is formed and decisions about it are made based on like prior performance, hard data, not just emotion. Does that make sense? I kind of got a little sideways there, I think. But
no, it does. I mean, it makes complete sense. And I only ask because it is so hard to understand how people react and act in certain situations. And what we forget is that we are human beings and we will be triggered by stress. We will be triggered by other people. And just holding space for that is probably the most important thing. And then we can come together to find solutions or a path forward. So I appreciate the way you broke that down. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I would tell you that idea you just said of like holding space for each other. That's a key reason why we all need to work on trust, because the more trusting we are in our environment of one another, the more willing we're going to be to hold space.
Yeah.
Like when we're all going to show up poorly one day. We're all going to have that stress response one day. We're all going to have like the kids didn't sleep well the night before. And so I am just not happy when I get to work or whatever. Or the day that opportunity knocks and because of that, we get a whole bunch more work to do. And that's going to be hard and difficult, right? We're all going to have times like that. And so we need to have a relationship with each other that's strong enough that when it takes a hit like that, it absorbs the difficulty, it absorbs the stress, and kind of passes that energy through the relationship and through our trust filters to say, bam, oh yeah, bad thing happened, but I trust Brandon. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help him. And that's why investing in trust is a long-term endeavor that helps the full business that we lead. Because then when those stressor events happen, we have some cushion there to help us move through those and be as effective as we can be. And even push through to higher levels of effectiveness and innovation because, I trust Brandon. He understands our customers. He understands my vision for the business, so on and so forth. So I can give him the reins of something we need to do because I trust him. So the more we invest in those things, the better we're going to handle both the positive and the negative stressors that come to our business every minute and every hour.
Amen. Yeah, if you don't have strong enough trust to, like you said, absorb the blows, they're going to happen every 5 minutes in business. So that will destroy your organization. I love the way you put that. Adam, this was fantastic. I'm going to put your website on the screen for those of you watching or listening, it's down in the show notes below. Tell me how you help people and where the audience can find out more about you.
Yeah, so the fastest, easiest way, if you're in the US, you can use the short code 33777 and just text operator to it. That's 33777 and text operator to it. There's a couple guides on the other side of that to help you out. And then it also kind of brings you into like some of my newsletter flow and some things like that to stay in touch. Fastest, easiest way. And then the second is go to the tenaciousoperator.com. I talk there about being a leadership guide. And then the last thing I'll mention is I'm a super avid LinkedIn contributor. So I post every day about building trust and becoming a great leader. And I'd love to have people connect with me and be part of the conversation there.
Awesome. I appreciate that. We'll put all that down in the show notes below. So wherever you're watching or listening, you have access to Adam. Go reach out, connect, figure out how to implement this stuff into your business, build a stronger organization that moves forward. Adam, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun.
See you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.